It was 100 a week ago. So I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Well, I just got back from a wonderful vacation at the beach, and it was cooler there than it is here, which is sort of hard to believe, but hey, doesn't matter. It is all good.
All righty. Hey, Vernique. Thanks for joining us. We got Vernique from Texas. We'll see who else we get in here. Hopefully we get a good turnout of people letting us know where they're coming from. But in the meantime, why don't we go ahead and get started, Kevin? I'm sure we could talk forever because it's you and me. So
Sure.
we don't want to hold this up too long.
Let's do it.
Why like I said, this webinar, just so everybody's aware, is brought to us by Insight Software. So they provide solutions for the office of the CFO, financial processes, etc. And Kevin obviously is from Insight Software. Why don't we start with having you do a brief introduction of yourself, Kevin?
Sure. So I am, again, my name's Kevin, as Paul had mentioned. So I'm a
Kevin, I think we lost you for a second. You appear to have frozen. Hopefully he'll be back in a minute. I'll go ahead and introduce myself while we're waiting for Kevin to come back on stage here. So anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Paul Barnhurst. There we go, Kevin. We lost you for a second. You froze.
Oh,
Why don't
sorry.
you start that over?
Sorry. As Paul had mentioned, my name's Kevin. I'm a finance professional. I've lived and breathed inside of the finance space for 25 plus years. My job here at Insight Software is I'm a demo guy. I'm a CPA. I demo products to customers that help them with this FP&A process we're going to talk about. So apologies there for the loss of the internet there. Hopefully it won't happen again, but that's just a little about me, Paul.
All right, great. And if it does happen, we won't blame you. We'll just
that's fine. That's fine.
All right. As I said, my name is as Vernique said there, she summed it up with this comment.
Oops.
That's how we felt on this end as well. Although I have had worse. I had one with 1,000 people and it crashed and we had to start a new one and had to use a completely different link and try to get everybody over to the new one on the fly. That was not fun.
Software.
Gotta love it. All right. Speaking of software, that's you guys, Insight Software. What we're going to talk about today, as I mentioned, my name is Paul Barnhurst, the FP&A guy. I've been running my own business for about 3.5 years. I talk a lot about FP&A, Microsoft, Excel, software solutions, data storytelling, all kinds of different things. And today we're just going to talk about some topics that are trending in the FP&A space. Some practical strategies that could help you guys. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'd love to just start with what are some of the key things you're seeing in the industry today, Kevin? You talk to finance people on a daily basis. Obviously, AI. Everybody knows AI is one of those things you're hearing, but let's start with some things other than AI that you're hearing these days.
Well, I mean, I guess it's probably a close second, but I mean, cloud-based applications and solutions is obviously that's been a buzzword now for the last 5, 6, 8 years, I guess, maybe longer, Paul. But it's certainly something folks are adopting. AI is right there, as I mentioned. We can belabor that conversation for a long time because that is literally scratching the surface. But just from an FP&A perspective, sometimes I think these comments to me are more common sense, if you will. But the fact that, what we're hearing, what we're seeing is it used to be the fact that you and I, Paul, being in the FP&A kind of area, we were responsible for everything from start to finish. You created the budget, you implemented the budget, you did all the accounting, you did all the work, all of those different things. And then ultimately your decisions were not based off of necessarily the true factual pieces because the people who created the numbers are the ones not even involved with the numbers. So we're seeing a heavy switch to a more collaborative effort, if that makes sense. Decentralized is another way to put it, where you're seeing a lot more involvement from other areas of an organization, which is sort of unique because the model has always been around this technical process of using Excel or using some automation process that only accounting folks knew. And now developed products are coming around that are helping include other folks. I think is sort of the summary of all of it, whether it's AI, whether it's not AI, whether it's a cloud-based solution that allows integration from other areas. It's definitely a switch in the market of who's involved with what part of the process.
So let me make sure I got it. What you're seeing is just that need to involve more than finance. We're really seeing much more of an to truly make budgeting forecasting collaborative
Right.
versus a top down exercise or a finance only exercise. Anyone who's worked in finance has experienced this. And if you haven't, you will. That's not my number. I don't recognize that number. Where did you get that number? And you're laughing, Kevin. How many times have you heard that one over your career?
Well, being personally involved with it, and that's the thing. We would crunch numbers, analyze numbers, predict numbers, create a budget. And, I've questioned this in 25 years I've been involved, is the fact that why do you only budget one time a year? Because as soon as you implement that budget, let's be honest, that was created back in August and September of the previous year. I was a fiscal year when I was involved. You implemented it in January. The budget literally is already 4 and 5 months old before it even got to January, because that was completed, predicted, and approved, only to have one event happen. Tariffs. Let's talk about those. Have one event that changes that whole entire model, but yet your budget's set. So then you saw a slight shift to, let's rebudget quarterly. Let's do a forecast. And maybe we do it every 6 months, something. But the switch has now come to, we almost budget every month now. It's become it's almost as live as the data, because as information's coming in, the predictability in the modeling is trying to adapt to that information as fast as you're allowed to see it.
We've definitely gone to much more of a rolling forecast process where we're trying to almost plan continuously, so to speak. I mean, like the idea of a continuous close. We're not there. But I remember when I worked for American Express in our first place, we did a quarterly forecast. And I remember when we did our plan, we'd have a 0 plus 12 to true it up right before the year started. Because what was approved was no longer realistic. And it was always kind of funny. Wait, what's a 0 plus 12? Isn't that just a budget? But that's what we call it. So then we did go to we finally went to hey, you close the budget, and then each month we're just going to do risks and opportunities. So it was high level. And I really liked that approach versus doing a quarterly big, huge reforecast that took a ton of resources and everybody's time versus, spend a little bit of time with the business each month, focus more on, analyzing the data and really supporting the business. And let's just do the high level risk and opportunities against the forecast all year long so we can make intelligent decisions at a corporate level based on where we think we're going to land. Because, right, if you're a public company, you got to report externally, investment decisions. So many things are made, board decisions based on where you think you're going to land and how that budget is performing. And
Exactly. I mean, when I was in healthcare years ago, as crazy as it sounds, we had 11 months of where our numbers met our budget almost spot on. And then we had our 12th month where it was really bad, because what we did is we didn't reforecast, we didn't rebudget. We just made sure that our monthly numbers for 11 months met the budget. And then the 12th one, we just said, you know what, those are audit adjustments. That was under predictability. We went through all of these excuses to find out that your 12th month was your worst month. Now, that could have been a good month or a bad month, depending on where the numbers came out. But ultimately, that's long gone. Now, the sad part about it is, Paul, is that there's a lot of businesses out there that can't support the model of reforecasting in real time, or even maybe quarterly, without piling on a bunch of work, because they don't have the resources, they don't have the capability, which is sort of that next topic of conversation of, how do you improve that? What are we seeing? Well, it's automation. I mean, the folks are trying to bring as much automation and processes. There's a lot of good tools out there, from budgeting and planning to just reporting, that are now helping, and businesses are catching on, even though some of these tools have been around a long time, but they're really making them very nice and very available and very self-intuitive, if you will, to just make that process better.
Well, it's so much easier today to integrate your data. Whether you're using a platform or connectors or whatever, you should be able to access and get a hold of your data much easier than you used to. That's a huge one. Now we're seeing AI and different things that can help. It's not as hard as it used to be. Is it still difficult? If you're $1 billion company, you're trying to use Excel and some add-ins to do it all. Yeah, it's still going to be really, really painful. And there's always going to be some technical challenges, no matter how good your tech stack is. As I always like to say, and I know you agree, right? It's people, it's processes, and people includes culture, creating that process mindset. Then it's technology. The platform does not solve your problems. It enhances a team that's doing good work. It makes them more efficient and effective, which is what we all want. I've been on good teams where we have terrible systems, And we got a lot done and we made a difference, but it was painful. It was hell. I'll be
Right.
honest, when
No.
when you got 10 different versions of your main customer and you never know what the revenue is and you're trying to roll it up and you're like, why did it change from last time? I don't know. One of the 6 systems, something changed. It's like I still remember being in a meeting with my boss. He's like, your reports are great. You're making huge progress, but they need to be consistent. The data, I don't know what to tell you. That was
Well, I
not
know
a fun conversation.
your ERPs are even catching on, obviously, too. ERPs being obviously the source of truth for all of this information, is that they're allowing these other products now, these bolt-ons, to happen. They're not just an area where you store the data. They're an area now where you can start analyzing the data, just get a better picture and model of that data. I still think there's a long way to go, because even with AI, Paul, we found out, we use it a lot here internally at Insight, is the fact that AI taught us where there was a lot of holes in our data, to be honest, because AI is only as good as the information that it's reading. And if the information's not good, it's the garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, that AI told us where that garbage was, if you will, and allowed us to fix it. So there's goods with the AI as long as you understand how to use it. The bads are if you're just relying on it and thinking that everything the AI is generating is correct. We have a lot of education to do, and that's not just, again, we learned that in the beginning very quickly, that AI is a great tool, but you have to understand what it's doing, where the data is coming from, and understand that if you're going to rely on it, make sure you're validating what it's actually reading.
Yeah, 100% agree. And just everybody who's out there, please put any questions you have in the chat. I know we've seen a lot of different people coming in. We have Brianne from Salt Lake. We have Yana from Nashville. So please, as you have questions, let us know. I want to switch subjects a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned something earlier, and I think this has been a real challenge for people. I did a webinar on this, is all the uncertainty we've had lately, tariffs. Regardless, we're not going to get into politics about tariffs. We're going to talk about trying to manage them and manage the uncertainty of there's been a lot of different reactions and there's been changes. And one thing, at least I always craved, if I wanted to be accurate and really help the business, was some level of stability, right? Mm-hmm. If you know the policy is this way one week and it's a different way next week, that's really hard to plan. And we've experienced some of that. So I brought on an expert in pricing. His name is Karen Sood, onto one of my podcasts. And we had a great conversation around tariffs. And I'll share a little bit of what he said, and I'd love to get your thoughts. What I really like that he talked about is, one, first, you gotta, I don't want to say torture your data, but you need to really understand your data. If you're a company that has a lot of different inputs, okay, which ones of those are impacted by tariffs? How much could it be? How price sensitive are those things? How price sensitive is your overall product? What you're going to be your transparency of pricing. And so us from FP&A, our job is first to dig into that data and to be able to bring a story with insights and information to the business. There may be some economic stuff you need to do, understanding elasticity. There's obviously a lot of cost analysis you need to do, some recommendations, and then having those discussions. Then I think there's the question of transparency. I've really appreciated these companies said, look, we're going to give you our base price and we're going to tell you how much the tariffs is costing us, so you can kind of see and understand, hey, we just raised your price by 10% for this reason, or by 5%. But, this isn't something just FP&A owns. Obviously, this is an entire business impact. But I'd love to get some of your thoughts on tariffs. And I'm going to just throw something here, just kind of going back. Just answer real quick Veronique's question. LLMs are still not good at math. They'll never be good at math by the way they solve things. What they've done is they've all brought in coding. So often what the LLM does is it takes your math problem, throws it out to a code language, and lets the code solve it, which Python, whatever they're using, can be really good at math. So still not great at math, what we'll call generative AI, the LLMs, but they found ways around that to give you a much higher accuracy rate. But I digress there for a minute, but I just saw that come through, so I thought we'd answer it. Back to tariffs.
Yeah, and I think that's where you mentioned it, predictive modeling. And I think that, to me, a lot of the topics that you'll hear us go through, collaboration is always the big one for me. Communication is a slight way to reword that, but if you're trying to predict and handle all this without input from the folks who know, that's going to be a challenge. That's why I think this business partnering, and I don't mean it could be a third party business partner, but I mean business partners as internal. You go to your sales team, you go to your marketing team, you go to whatever team is out there that you have resources for who actually know what's happening in the market. The accounting department and the FP&A departments are not the know-it-alls. We have access to all of it,
Come on,
but we
I'm a
don't.
know-it-all. At least my family thinks I am.
Well, talk to my wife. That might be a different conversation. But ultimately, it's one of those things, Paul, where I think the more that you can collaborate, tariffs, it's not that that's new. It's been around a long time. It
Yeah.
just happens to be a hot topic in the market. But ultimately, that predictability is wavering just because of deals that are being made, the changes that are happening faster than we can even account
Yeah.
for them. That's why the folks on the front lines, if you will, the ones who are dealing in those areas on a regular basis can help you with that modeling. And that's why that business partnering and those tools of collaboration that exist today are very important. They've always been important. It's just that folks are just now realizing it. And to be honest, they were lacking in collaboration. It was really just something meant for the FP&A or the accounting department. And that's not the case anymore. And business models need to change on that. The live modeling needs to change or become better. Again, we've talked to organizations where that forecasting is just as live as the reporting itself. It's a side-by-side conversation of take the historical accounting numbers, try to predict off of those, and the only thing you know when you're done is the number you just found out is going to be the wrong one because the model has already changed. It's like technology. You almost can't keep up fast enough. And tariffs are just one of those topics right now that are running rampant out there in the accounting world.
Yeah, and you're right. No matter what you do, there's always going to, like you said, never be right, but kind of creating that certainty. Would love to know if anyone has any thoughts, challenges, questions around what they've dealt with tariffs. So I think a couple things we talked about, obviously a little bit about AI, automation, the huge increased need for collaboration, partnering, whatever you want to call it. You can't be in a silo anymore.
No.
That great FP&A, that was always the case. But I think we're really now catching on for the entire business. All companies are really starting to see, hey, there's real value if we have FP&A work as a consultant internally and really consult and work with our business and help them achieve things that helps us all be better, having that financial perspective at the table. Here's a great one. And I will obviously throw this one to you, Kevin, because I think you're a nonprofit guy, right? No,
I was.
between you and me, how can nonprofit organizations plan around tariffs and their effect on donor behavior when fundraising is such a huge component of their operations and their ability to provide services? I'll take a stab at it, then I'll give it to you, Kevin.
Sure.
That's a really hard question to answer. I think the key is first, knowing your donors, right? Do you have a feeling for how are tariffs impacting them? Some of your donors may not be impacted at all. Keep in mind, tariffs don't apply to services. Tariffs, not every country has implemented tariffs. So now the U.S. right now has implemented them on just about every country. And so I think the first thing is just trying to get a good sense of what's the potential range of impact, running some scenarios. Hey, if everybody donated 10% less, what does that do to our business? And what's the likelihood of that? What's 5%? Obviously, I don't know enough about your space to even wager a guess on what that number might be. But that's where I would start, is trying to get an idea of what potential change in behavior. What does that do to my operations? And then you have to go through and look at, okay, if that worst case happens, where do I cut? What are the non-essential or least essential things I can start with? And kind of have that list of what that looks like. Those would be some thoughts. What about you, Kevin? Any thoughts on this one?
Yes, and I think it has to do with the fact that I would approach it being a non-for-profit for a long time. One of the ways you differentiate yourself to always have donors be involved or donors be willing to give is the value that either that they're providing with their donations or the benefactors of who's going to receive that contribution. Meaning this, if you're in the nonprofit space and you're supporting X, Y, and Z scenarios or markets, whether it's I don't know, just name a market in the non-for-profit area. I think showing value will trump the fact that the tariffs may get in the way of the donations or the contributions to the organization. Because if they believe in what value you're providing, they will continue to donate. Now, if you're going after new vendors in this conversation or new donors, then you certainly have to figure out, to Paul's point, if they're even impacted. Did the tariffs even change their process, what's going on? And I think that would come back to the second step, which is the relationship side. If you build a relationship with them, you may not get the donation you want on day one, but building that relationship with them will lead to future donations. I would believe that worked for us. It's not just about asking, it's also providing that value and providing that relationship back, knowing they're actually getting something and they believe in the process that you're providing. I think will trump that tariff conversation ultimately. But if you have to address it, I think you really have to understand the market they're in and what impact it might have, so you can do that.
So they added a little context now that we've answered. To add context, we are a politically driven nonprofit. Good luck. Wait, no. Fundraising and spending is highly dependent on the political climate, which determines our goals. I think a lot of the same things we said apply. You just have to understand what it means to today's political climate, and then looking at scenarios. What if that changes? Like, what political climates is best for you, which are worst, and how they impact you. It still kind of comes back to trying to understand both new customers and existing customers, because people want to give as a general rule, right? I think most people by nature are caring and want to give and want to support causes. And so it's trying to understand how things are impacting them, how it may limit, and then making assumptions around that.
I think you'll find this. And to be very clear, Paul, it's kind of funny. I'm reading these as they come in. Is the fact that the nonprofit I was in was politically driven nonprofit. I mean, it was. That's how we made that was our business model. And I think what happens is you'll have folks who are very passionate about the process, who will always give no matter what happens. And then you'll have new ones who will join in that process to say, well, wait a minute, I'm either for or against the political climate we're in.
Correct.
And they become more motivated. So I think you'll lose some, but I also think you'll gain some just based off where the political climate changes. And think about it like a pendulum. It's going to swing back and forth all the time. You're going to lose for some reason and you're going to gain for other reasons that you didn't even think about. But ultimately, in the end, to your point, Paul, I think if you're passionate enough and you believe in what it's doing, you will donate really no matter where the political climate may or may not be, depending on your stance. Again, you believe in what's happening. You find the value in what's happening, and therefore I think those contributions will continue. But again, you have to understand it. You can't just take it for granted. You have to provide, you have to show, and then ultimately I think your work will pay off in the end.
Great. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to shift gears here a little bit. We've had our political discussion. We've talked tariffs, automation. We're seeing some other trends. And two that I want to share. First, I had the pleasure of chatting for quite a while just last week with a recruiter. And I want to share what he said. He goes, companies come to him and they're saying the hardest thing for them is getting employees that don't just dump the data kind of on the business's lap, that can really interpret it, that can influence, that can tell the story. We're seeing that shift from what I used to call FP&R, and I think that shift started a long time ago, but it's just accelerating from financial planning and reporting to really analysis. I had one guy on my podcast, guy by the name Andrew Hole, CFO now, where he says, can we just change it to FANP? 80% of the time should be on the analysis. And so what we're seeing is more and more of the need to be strategic driven, to have the soft skills, the collaboration we talked about. Just providing the reports is not enough. They need us to interpret the data. And with that, we've seen a real increase in the education that's out there for FP&A. I'm going to ask, when you came out of school, did you even know what FP&A was, Kevin?
No.
Ever heard of it when you got your accounting or finance degree?
I'm too old for that, Paul. No.
I didn't either. And I know we're about the same age. So thanks for calling me old. I appreciate that. But that's changed today. Just today, as an example, Corporate Finance Institute launched a new FP&A certificate. They call it the FP&A Professional Program Certificate. And so we're seeing more and more programs out there. I worked with them on a couple courses. And so just more and more of a need to be educated, to really make sure FP&A is forward looking for the business. Historically, you'd saw a lot of overlap with accounting, and you still do in smaller companies, but bigger companies are really trying to separate and let FP&A really focus on the future. And with that becomes a greater and greater need for soft skills. Thoughts on that, Kevin?
Absolutely, and I think your point of emphasis here, for at least to start, is the fact that smaller businesses can't adopt to that model yet. I mean, they just don't have the resources. Sometimes the FP&A person is also the front desk receptionist. It just happens to, it just
Yep.
because some folks can interpret FP&A as being financial planning and accounting, which is not what the A stands for. But in some businesses, it is, because they are the ones who do it all from start to finish. But larger organizations are implementing a model that allows for that segregation, because we as accountants are so buried in the numbers, we sort of get lost on what the numbers mean. And they certainly are now changing that. And the certifications vary across the industry, right? You always used to think about FP&A or the accounting, let's say, as a CPA. Well, I think it's not taking a step back, because that CPA certification is still fantastic. But there's a lot of other certifications out there now. And Paul, what I laughed a couple hours ago as I was preparing myself for today's call, I did a little Google search on certifications for FP&A. And one of the ones that didn't come up in there that I found was odd, it didn't mention anything about Excel certifications, which, as you know, that's where, let's be honest, there are billions of users of Excel today. And no matter where you are, you even mentioned a little bit ago about dumping your data to Excel, is the fact that certification of Excel, their knowledge and expertise, is starting to get lost, even because, and I have twin 18-year-old boys who just graduated, and they don't teach Excel in school. They teach Google Sheets, which to me is almost offensive, because Excel is it. Google Sheets are not Excel. They're not even close to being Excel. But ultimately, those certifications are important. But I think what certifications you are getting are just as important. If you're going to be an FP&A, a CPA, is not necessarily the one that you want. It's certainly others out there that, the financial modeling and evaluation analysts are great certifications. Chartered financial analysts are great certifications. And the new one that you just mentioned, Paul, are the ways the industry are changing. They're realizing that needs to be done. And I think a lot of folks can jump on board with that. But 100% agree, FP&A didn't exist 25 years ago.
No, I agree. When you talk about certifications, there's the one that came out today. Vernique mentioned she didn't hear it until 15 years into her career. You have AFP's program. Wharton Online released one. There's the Certified Global FP&A Professional. So what we're seeing a lot of them crop up, and a lot in the last year or two. AFP's been around for about a decade with their FP&A certification. They're the ones that had Treasury. And so the opportunities to educate yourself in this space are better than they've ever been. And I
Right.
think it's needed, the upskilling, the constantly growing. The number one thing I hear when I ask people, what's most needed in FP&A? I ask like kind of the soft skill, what to do to be a better business partner. And one of the terms I hear the most about being a better business partner is curiosity. And someone once labeled it as humble curiosity. And that's always stuck with me. We have to be curious. We have to always be learning if we want to be great at our jobs. And so, just huge. And we see a lot of, comments coming in, someone talking about, CMA, and they're sitting for that. CMA, I think, is more applicable to FP&A than the CPA. I just didn't mention it as it's been around a long time, and it's not a direct FP&A certification. It is an accounting one, but the management side does have some alignment. Some really like CFI setup. So we're seeing a lot of comments on that. We've seen some where someone said a lot of companies are struggling to decide what position they really need with current change AI brings to the table. Right? Companies are all trying to figure it out. So I think the bottom line is we're nearly up on time. So we're gonna wrap up here. And I just want to put this out there that on June 25th, there's an upcoming webinar for those who are interested from Insight Software. You should see the link in the comments here that should be put in by somebody here in just a minute for those who are interested. But as we wrap up, we're in an ever-changing environment. Tariffs, AI, automation, more certificates. If you want to be great at FP&A, first thing is you can't rest on your laurels. You need to be learning, you need to be growing. You also need to be looking at what can help me out there from a technology standpoint. Start with people, start with processes, then look there. Then realize there's lots of ways to educate yourself. Is there any perfect program? No. Is there any perfect
Yeah.
path? I get asked so often, well, which one's better, this or that? And that's like, well, which software is better? The one that meets your needs, the one you can implement that's within your budget, that you've done your homework and makes sense for your requirements. And that's going to be different for everybody. Kevin, do you think every customer in the world should use just one of your programs at your company, or you guys have a lot of software?
We have a lot of software, like 86 versions of software, Paul, on this side.
And that's not because there's people need to have different needs, is it?
No, no, not at all. No, no. Everybody does planning and budgeting and tax and equity management and disclosure and reporting. But you know, the one they always come back to, Paul, every single time, I don't care what product you show me. I don't care what financial area you're in, FP&A to the accounting side. Excel's always in there somewhere. I promise you it always is. And you show me the best product in the world, and there's always a button in there. It says export to Excel. So that upcoming webinar that you're scrolling across the bottom is exactly that. It's Excel's not going away. Whether you're in this area of the business or that area of the business, you're always using Excel. And that webinar is going to it's going to take a deep dive into how Excel is still being used and how real time it can be with your processes. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, I think we ran a few minutes over. Not surprising. Kevin and I can go forever, but I like what Vernique said. Great conversation, guys. I love this. So people liked it. We may have to do it more often, but thank you so much for joining us. If you didn't get your question answered, feel free to reach out to Kevin or I. We'd love to get a note from you, and we'll do our best to get back to you. And if you want to learn more about Insight Software, check them out at their website. I'm really excited that they were willing to sponsor this event, and we had the opportunity to chat with all of you. So thanks again for joining us, and everybody have a great Monday.
Thank you all.